All right, I'll remove her from any email back.
Good evening and welcome to the March regularly scheduled Board of Education for Smithville Arts School. I want to apologize for the short delay. We had some contractual things we needed to address in executive session before we take care of them in open session later on, so they needed to be handled. If you would, please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, 7.0, adoption modification of the agenda. Sure, I'm unmuted. 7.1, adoption modification of the agenda. Does anybody have any changes or modifications to the agenda as presented? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the agenda as presented in our packet.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented in our packet. Please vote. Motion passes. 7.2, approve the regular session meeting minutes for February 16th, 2022. Any corrections or modifications to those minutes needed? Or comments to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the regular session meeting minutes for February 16th, 2022.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the regular session meeting minutes for February 16th, 2022. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 7.3, approve the board self-evaluation meeting minutes for February 21st, 2022. Any comments or questions, changes need to be made to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the board self-evaluation meeting minutes for February 21st, 2022.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the board self-evaluation meeting minutes for February 21st, 2022. Please vote. Motion passes. 8.0, approval of consent agenda items. 8.1, bills for payment, March 2022. 8.2, supplemental pay for March 2022. 8.3, out-of-state travel request for the SWAT team. 8.4, Aptogee, new website, app, and message platform. Any comments or questions on the consent agenda items as presented in the packet?
I just wanted to say that I looked at the Aptogee site and it looked really good, and it does save us money, correct? In the long run, that was another thing that was really important. So I thought that that looked really good. Just wanted to say that publicly. Thank you for doing all your work and looking at that, Mindy.
She has done a lot of work to determine whether it's right for us in conjunction with the technology department and with Robert to be sure it makes sense financially. And when we get this up and running, we'll give you some demos and show you what it's all about, all the bells and whistles.
Were there going to be multiple users of this? Okay.
From the management side, you can set the level that you want each person, so they can have access to just modify like a single website or all of the websites. They can have access to just the notification system or just social media. So you can set levels for each user in the district.
I was just thinking of the certain things that only hit Twitter or only hit Facebook or only hit Instagram that could be pushed to all of those platforms at one time, and everybody, the consistency and the exposure district wide will be huge that one. So
You have it all on an app on your phone, and you can select which platforms you want it to go to.
okay,
It's a
Thank
great
you.
tool for a one-person communication shop.
Any other comments or questions on the consent agenda items as presented in our packet? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion and a second to approve our consent agenda items as presented.
So moved.
Second. Got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items as presented. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 9.0 communications, 9.1 board priorities update.
Yeah, I've got 3 items for you in there. Item number 1, last month I spoke with the board about the teacher shortage and a workshop that I've been to and some things I learned and some ideas that I had. One of them was a regional teacher shortage summit, if you will. Got a hold of cooperating school districts, Kenny Southwick and Paul Shrout and their office, and they jumped on this. School's canceled, by the way. Everybody's phone's going to be going off. School's canceled. Robert, it's all you're doing. Just get that out of the way. But anyway, they jumped on this right away. Actually, the National School Personnel Hub is in Overland Park. And so they sponsored the workshop that I went to. They're going to get involved. We're going to get some people from the universities, local universities at the table. And they got really, really excited about it. And I had said, I can facilitate this. I can do this. I can do that. And they're like, we got it. No need. We've got it. This is a hugely critical topic. And we need to get behind this with our resources and make this happen. So they're going to take the ball and run with it from here, which tickled me. Because they do have, they're going to go across the state line. We're going to bring Kansas people in on the conversation. So it'll be good. I suggested the month of June, that's their target. No matter where you land, it's going to be a bad month for somebody, but excited about that. And we'll see where that goes. Item number 2, as you know, you have several new positions being recommended in your packet. Robert's going to go through some finances that will help you intelligibly discuss those new positions. But again, I'll tell you that hearing from our staff this school year, teachers need support and they want support. And some of these positions are designed just to do that. And then item number 3, POAC is, as you know, has made a big difference, and we're wrapping up our latest round of POAC presently at both the high school and middle school. That's wrapping up right now. Okay. Okay, and then lastly, again, this is under board priorities update. As we talk about board priorities, I'm just reminding myself here, and Karen's making a note, that I am to check with school districts around us and the structures they have in place for board retreats, right? That's something that you were wanting me to do. And so I'm making a mental note of that. Karen's making a note too. And then I can bring that to you next month, what some districts around us do for board retreats. And I say that because an ideal topic would be what your priorities might be going into the next year. Why does the superintendent the last one to get the call that school's canceled? That's all I have for you for board priorities. Unless you have questions for me.
9.2 Assistant Superintendent for Academic Services, Dr. Cradfield.
I have a few items listed and then I have a few others to add, but in relation to the teacher retention, just wanted to share that I will be recruiting at MU next Tuesday and a virtual recruiting fair on Wednesday with UCM. So those are my last two for the year, and the last one that I was at in Northwest had really good participation. So I was very excited about that. Also connected to that is our Grow Your Own work that we're doing. Rochelle Sinclair and I have been participating in a cohort at the Kansas City Regional Professional Development Center, where we're able to learn and collaborate with other school districts who either have a Grow Your Own initiative or are working on one. And so I think you all are aware that we have a pretty robust cadet teaching program. And as part of the grant funds that we have received for Grow Your Own, we are launching a scholarship for those students next year. So if they plan to continue on in post-secondary as an education student, they would be able to apply for this grant or this scholarship. We'll have about $2,750 every year for 3 years to distribute to the kids. So very excited about that. So we got the parameters for that set and we'll be able to launch that next year. As we were sitting there, I asked Rochelle how many students had enrolled in cadet teaching or had expressed an interest in cadet teaching for next year. And so she contacted the registrar, and so mind you, the most we've ever had is 14. This year we happen to have 3. Next year there are 28 students who have expressed interest in cadet teaching. So that is very, very exciting. And we just need to continue to market to our students how wonderful career teaching is. You know, we kind of take it for granted because they're with us all the time for 13 years, and you would think that they know everything about it. But when we have career fairs, sometimes we're the profession that's missing, and that's not okay. So we need to make sure that we're communicating what a fulfilling and wonderful career education really is. Related to the board's priorities, we are wrapping up the Kindness and Inclusion Committee. We have a draft plan that we'll present to the group on March 30th. It includes things such as professional learning, things related to governance and policy, curriculum and instruction, which focuses really on character building and also instructional practices that include everyone, which we already have quite a few, and we just need to continue to refine those and build on those. Partnering with our community, all of those aspects are part of this plan. So we're excited to finish that up, and hopefully we'll be bringing the draft to you in April at your board meeting. Warriors Explore, our summer program. We are launching, well, actually we launched registration today. We had intended to do a big kickoff like we usually do on Friday, but not knowing if we're even going to be here on Friday, we went ahead and opened the registration today and sent materials home with students. So all of that is now live on our district web pages and linked to the building web pages. So we're excited to have Warriors Explore again this summer, and we've got some modifications that we're piloting a program called Defined Learning, which is a problem-based learning program, all revolving around careers. So again, this attaches to our real world learning initiative and the work that we're doing with Kaufman, and that Carol Noker is spearheading for us. So excited about that. And lastly, several months ago, I shared with you VU scholarships, which is a program which students can enter their ACT, their GPA, and find out from the bank of colleges that are currently enrolled in that program what scholarship packages they could expect based upon those 2 criteria. So that doesn't include things such as athletics or music, other talents and abilities that you have, but just strictly on the academic side. I met with the gentleman who runs this today. We currently have 37 students who have enrolled to use that information. On average, there are 10 scholarships that have been offered to those 37 students, with a total package of $483,000 per student. So of those 10, they are getting they're getting quotes back of $483 or $483,000 per student, a total of $17.8 million that our students could tap into just these 37. The whole idea behind VIEW scholarships is to reverse the process in which we think about where we want to go to college. So typically we think about where we want to go, we apply, and we see what kinds of a package we can get. This puts the receiving the package at the front end so that you can use that information to help you think and then apply to the school that may provide you the best bang for your buck as far as scholarships go. You know, I don't know the answer to that. So we clearly need to get more students using this vehicle so that they have good information as they're looking at their post-secondary opportunities. So Mindy, I'm going to ask Mindy to join me with the next on the next meeting that I have with Andrew Marquez to do a better job of marketing and making sure we're using some of this data so that families and students know what kind of information is available to them as they're making these really important decisions. And as a parent of 2 kids who have just finished their post-secondary education, I mean, this information is so important to be able to, you know, enter your adult life as debt-free as possible is a gift. So, you know, this is something that we really need to be marketing more, and we'll continue to work on it and hopefully get more of our students involved in entering their information into the system so they can find out what they can get.
It's like a search engine that opens up all the opportunities with the existing educational institutions.
And they have a limited number right now. They have about 30 colleges and universities all across the country that are in there. But they have another product that they use specifically with ammunition that has over 15. So they're
That's going to be
anticipating getting those
huge.
colleges and universities to participate as well.
Huge, and then it's going to help institutions compete and drive down, hopefully, credit hour prices.
Oh, yeah, that's all I have unless you have questions for me.
I was gonna say congratulations on your youngest. I saw the NCC picture.
Yes,
Yeah,
he's
for-
very excited. Started his job 2 weeks ago today, actually, and was a very happy welder.
Well, and the reason I brought that up was because I know Scott has mentioned a couple times about those types of programs, you know, not necessarily the arts, but the trades, and at 19 is starting his career in welding. So
Yes,
And
thank
paying his
you.
own bills,
What?
paying his own bills.
Not yet, but close.
9.3, is any other comments or questions for Dr. Cradfield? Sorry. 9.3, Executive Director of Sports Services.
Of course, I guess, do we need to talk for spring break? I don't know if we get more than 4, is that quorum? And so we can, so we might have to have a couple people wait, go through right. So we'll figure out that so we don't, have a quorum there, but, and maybe we don't have more than 4, but I can take you individually to make sure we get everybody through that wants to go. But I wanted to throw that date out there during, spring break for those folks that want to come in and tour that building opportunity as well. So you'll get the RSP, just let me know, and we'll get everything set up and ready to go. So want to make sure everybody was aware of that. Again, our 2020 bond campaign activity items that we have. And so we have our activity center. And so you can see the mock-ups that we have are going to closely resemble now that a lot of the outside of building is complete, which is exciting. So there is the actual building as it sits today. You can see that all the paneling has been completed all the way around the building. And then all the windows have been installed, which really makes it and give it the look that it's going to give in the end. And if you can kind of focus on the first level there, you can see the garage doors have actually now been installed. And so what's nice is on certain days, they'll be able to take those garage doors up and kind of open up the facility, which will be a great addition. And those garage doors are actually glass through. So on days where it's not ideal weather outside and those are closed, somebody can still see out to the track, the field, whatever's going on as an activity out there. So it'll be a great facility for our students to use. The roof is also completed as well. And so they're just finishing up a lot of the fascia underneath the awnings and getting those complete as we speak right now. Of course, weather is not cooperating with us. It seems to be 70s one week and then a bunch of snow the next week. But since a lot of the completion items are inside, they're continuing to work right along and we're still on track. The next picture you see is the second level, looking towards the west in what will be the inside wrestling room. You can see to the left, you can see that's plywood where the safety mats will go along. And then you can see a little bit to the right where you see that half CMU block wall, which will kind of surround all the wrestling floor mats with outside wall mats. Over there to the right, you can see a little bit of the drywall, which is complete with the offices. And I'll show you what one of those offices look like here in a second. But this is what the downstairs looks like with those garage doors. So if you were sitting right here, you'd be probably at the back end of one of our weight racks looking out towards the field. And you can see how those garage doors let in that natural light, allow a coach to visibly, view the weight room, but also visibly view what's going on out on the field as well. And so a great, facility for everybody. To the right there, you can see what would be an entrance to the training room where Jenny Fight will be. Some offices, then also an entrance to the locker room is what those doors on the right. And then you have the mirrored to the left, with the exception of the training room, that switches out for a facility for our officials to change that are working, whether it's a soccer game or a football game. What you see here is what will be the future locker room. So you can see drywall's up, all the walls are painted. We're waiting for the resinous flooring to be installed before they put those lockers in, and then that will complete that area. So we're moving right along. We're mid-March right now. This is still on schedule to be the end of May when we can have an open house. If anything's delayed, really, it's just some of the inside pieces. Like we have a 4-row bleacher that's going to go in on the side of the wrestling room, and it's 12 weeks out right now. Just some interior things like that. But as far as the finishing the construction, there's no delays right now as we speak. Sure. It is actually pretty big. It has a capacity of about 60 people. So it's kind of back in a corner. It may not look as big from here, but I would say we fit our whole football team in the blockhouse right now. And for the most part, I would say it's about twice the size of that blockhouse room that they have right now. So the one thing about being home team too is because it's part of that weight room at any time, they might want to have that meeting in the locker room. They might bring our team into the weight room, which of course has room enough for everybody to be housed in there. So when you are on the tour, I know it does look different here, but it will feel bigger once you're in there and kind of see that room. So this is a timeline again. We're on schedule. Drywall is complete. The athletic flooring for the weight room should be installed in late March, which is that black sports flex kind of base for the weight room. The mats for the wrestling room above will not be in until late May, early June. And that's just from shortage of foam and the back orders that they've had. We ordered that way back after you guys approved that in the February board meeting. So that's how long the backlog is on those things. So, but it'll be there for the summer workouts and ready to go for them as far as wrestling goes. So we're excited. Things are moving right along. The next project, talk a little bit about is about HVAC. All the units for Horizon have been ordered. All of them are on schedule. Everything is ready to go. Summer school will not be at that building because we'll be constructing at that building and obviously have large cranes moving units and then putting new units on. So that building will not have any instruction over the summer for Horizon for that installation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Sure. Yep, anytime you guys want to come in, if only evenings work from you, we can come up in the evening and we can take a look as well.
9.4 comments from the audience. This is an opportunity for members of the audience to make comments to the board. A total of 20 minutes will be allocated for public comment. Speakers will be heard in the order in which they notified the superintendent of their desire to speak. Individuals addressing the board should state their name, address, limit the comments to no more than 5 minutes. Items or issues related to specific personnel should not be discussed in open session. I have one name tonight, Stacy Mason, speaking to the board on diversity and inclusion.
We good? Okay, Stacy Mason, 500 Highland Avenue. I'm a lifelong Smithville resident that attended Smithville schools from K through 12. My children, an 8th grader and sophomore, have also attended school here since kindergarten. I speak to you tonight as a mother, the wife of a staff member, a tax-paying citizen, and someone that has been involved with this school district for 4 decades. Before we vote for school board candidates in a few weeks, I want to take a moment to publicly thank you 7 for your service to our students and our staff. Though I've not always agreed with every decision that has been made, I had no doubt that during this tumultuous time, you were all weighing each decision heavily for the betterment of each student. I have attended every board meeting since the pandemic began, either virtually or in person. So you may have made decisions some of us parents didn't like. You did nothing to deserve the treatment you received. Thank you for sticking it out. When I contacted you last July before you voted on your school board priorities, I was curious about your 3rd priority, quote, to facilitate activities and practices that increase the level of staff and student acceptance as it relates to the diverse backgrounds of others, end quote, which has been a top 5 priority of the school board since 2017. I wanted to encourage the board to create action items towards that priority, something I hadn't seen. I knew stories of students at all grade levels in the past few years that have been harassed based on skin color, gender, or sexual orientation. The day I sat down to follow up with you in September, I asked my son if he experienced racism at school or witnessed it happening to anyone else and had no idea what was waiting for me. He reluctantly admitted to being called racial slurs at least every other day for the previous 2 months at football practice and sometimes in the classroom. In all, we turned in 12 students within 3 days. After speaking with other parents, students, and building administrators, it was clear there was a problem. Our district began this year with an alarming rate of violations towards minorities and gay and lesbian students. By October, we had 27 AC violations when we'd only been in school for 2 months. The most our district has had an entire year is 40. For those in the room that are unaware of what an AC violation is proven discrimination and harassment against employees or students based on race, color, religion, gender, disability, age, or any protected characteristic. These must be substantiated with proof, witnesses, or the offender admitting the offense. In October, the administration suggested, and you approved, POAC, People of All Colors Succeed, an outside organization to aid with small group discussions. Hundreds of our students have gone through the program, and you were able to hear personal stories of POAC's success from students during the January board meeting. The 7 of you made the decision to embrace kindness and inclusion for all, truly make a difference in our schools that will change generations to come. From the beginning of the school year until POAC started in November, there were 26 AC violations between the high school and middle school. Since POAC began, there have been 7. Having these conversations is working, but we can't stop here. We have more work to do. Since speaking out, I've had teachers and staff from every building approach me asking for 2 things. First, more inclusion training and education for themselves. Our student population is over 10% minority for the first time in our history. These educators that spoke to me admit they are uncomfortable during some of the conversations that are started by students. They need help with ideas of how to address some situations, and at times they don't know what to say. When we take care of our staff's needs, we collectively take care of our students' needs. 2, they are asking for added resources and programs like POAC within our schools. They do not feel the programs we currently have meet the needs, especially at an elementary level. Though some may say that these discussions shouldn't happen this early, I wish that was true. These discussions do happen. My own daughter was in kindergarten the first time she was told by a schoolmate that she couldn't do something because she was Black. Both of my children have experienced similar situations every year through school. Other parents of minority and gay and lesbian students will tell you the same. There have been at least 6 AC violations at our elementary schools so far this year. In total, we are up to 38 violations as of February 18th. As Dr. Crowdfield mentioned earlier in the evening, the Kindness and Inclusion Committee will be presenting a plan soon. Please consider this information while making decisions for our students and staff. 25 years ago, when I walked these halls, I was standing up against the same type of racism and homophobia that our students are still experiencing. You 7 have taken a brave step forward. As a school board member, you will leave a legacy. Thankfully, this year you chose to leave a legacy of respect, dignity, kindness, and inclusion for all students. As you and the community vote for school board members in a couple of weeks, vote for people that will continue this positive legacy. For those of you that are returning, it will be up to you to continue letting all students and staff know they are welcome within the Smithville School District. If we want our students to be well-rounded adults, reading, writing, and arithmetic are not the only learning they should be doing. We are doing all our students a disservice if we only teach them how to exist in the bubble of Smithville. Thank you for your time.
With that, I have to turn my phone. Sorry.
Okay, 10.0, old business, 10.1, general financial review.
Yes, as I said previously, Robert.
Paperwork, and before thank you, Randy. Before I review that, I just want to share a couple things unrelated to the documents. The first is on February 24th, the governor signed Bill HB 3014, which allocated 90% of the American Rescue Plan, basically ESSER funds, for a total of 1.9 billion statewide. For Smithville, that allocation is going to be $615,375, which is more than the original allocation of $606,961. So just wanted to let you know that was approved. And so that even though we anticipated those funds always coming, it kind of got interesting there towards the end, but the state legislature did come through and get that passed. And the second thing I wanted to mention is Mr. Kruger's been working to submit a third round of FEMA, and that is the emergency COVID grant funding. Our third application, we're going to be asking for $28,423.67. And so under the current structure, FEMA may reduce about 75% of those allowable costs. Those items include stuff like PPE, masks, gloves, and learning loss materials related to COVID. So just wanted to give you a quick update on that. And so with that, hopefully you guys all have the documentation that Karen passed out, and I appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen real quick as well. And so what I'm sharing with you as we start is a document that Mr. Kruger and myself has continually worked on that basically gives a long-term, very high-level view of our finances in our district. And what's great about this tool is we can insert numbers, whether it's the revenue side or expense side, and it can give us some projections, looks at whether we'll be have a, if we'll be over budget, under budget, and what our reserve ratio looks like for the year. So just to kind of outline the document, along the top columns, you can see starting with FY15, and then about in the middle, you can see the actual FY21 year. That's the last year that obviously we submitted ASBRs. We've not completed FY22 yet, which ends June 30th of this year. And so anything going past FY21 is all projections. On the top side of that document, you can see different revenues, and those revenues are based on a couple different assumptions. One, FY23, we are assuming a 5% increase in assessed valuation. If you guys may be familiar with the Hancock Amendment that says we cannot realize more gain than what the CPI is. Well, the state just realized through the tax commission that our CPI this year is 7%. Now we can't realize 7% because there is a cap of 5%, but because CPI was raised to that level, that means we feel very confident that we will see additional revenues of up to 5% this year in assessed valuation because of releasing that data. So although a lot of this is very high level and we're making projections, that projection we feel very confident about going forward. And then at the bottom of the document, you can see a lot of our expenditures. And with those expenditures, one of the items that's highlighted there is new staff or money to the certified, non-certified base. And you can see how that's highlighted starting in FY23, and I'll explain some of those numbers here in a bit. Towards the bottom of the document, you can see third line from the bottom, you can see end of year revenue percent. And so I did some conditional formatting on this document, and where you see green is where we are within board policy. Where you see red is where we are below board policy. And then where you see blue is years where we'd be above that 26% board policy. Up on the revenue side, you can also see a highlighted row that talks about the Golden Plains pilot. The Golden Plains pilot is, of course, the data center. They'll be going in on the west side of 169 by Vineyard Church. And we have started to put in some revenue figures based on their performance. We had a meeting with Red Velvet last month, and although they haven't given us anything finite yet, they did tell us that the project is basically pushed back a year due to red tape with the city, that what we saw in that original performa should be the same, just a year pushed out. So we have taken that data we originally had and put in the figures that they gave us for each year. So you can see in FY23, we would receive potentially $245,598 from the pilot payment from that entity. And so that kind of sets up some high level situations where we can start to project what next year may look like with the different expenses. Now, going back to new staff, the new staff requests that we have for next year, all those positions in total estimate a total of $426,000 in cost. Now, that is not knowing who the person may, one, that those staff requests have to be approved by the board in theory, and two, those situations have not even happened yet. So when we hire a teacher, it may be a teacher right out of college. It may be somebody with a high level experience coming in, higher on the salary scale. So we would know, the cost of that person until we actually hire them. So please remember that $426,000 for the actual additional staff is still a guesstimate at this point. We're just putting in numbers of what the average of that typically seems to be.
We're bringing the 426,000 worth to you tonight.
Absolutely. And Kim Davis has a great explanation for how those requests were made from our building administrators and how that was broken down and consolidated into what was presented to you. She'd be happy to share that with you as well.
Well, the FY23 projection, the 750 includes the new positions and rolling.
Right. So the reason you have two documents is I ran a scenario with one where we add 750 to the base for next year and every subsequent year. And then the other document you can see on the top is where we add 1,000 to the base for this year and then 750 every subsequent year. I do want to mention that our base salary for certified staff, if you look at Masters plus 10, is one of the lowest of all the districts in the KC metro area that we compare to those 25 districts. And so we're in the bottom third when you compare that Masters plus 10 with all those districts. And so as we start trying to put money towards the salary schedule, so do other districts as well. So for us to catch up, we got to put more to the schedule than they do to try to raise that level for those certified staff teachers. So that's why one reason I have the numbers in here that I've placed in here. The other reason I have the numbers placed in here is because those items are the items that closely put us to a balanced budget. So for example, if I can focus on the scenario that gives us 750 to the salary base, with that, we have an estimated negative budget of $52,000 for FY23. Now to put that in perspective, that means that's a negative budget of 0.17%. So if I was comparing that to a household salary and my household salary was $100,000, that means that was negative $170 for the year. So basically we're talking about a balanced budget when we're talking about a $30 million budget, when we're talking about $52,000. To talk about the $1,000 to the base scenario, that's a $152,000 deficit, which is a 0.5% budget deficit, which would, if you compare the same scenario to a $100,000 household, would be $500 in the red. So when you're talking about a $30 million budget, for those numbers to be that close to zero is pretty much a balanced budget.
Did you capture the assessment from all the equipment stuff projected into the outlook? Did you do that?
So
A lot of the new construction,
because it's unknown, we do not have it heavily calculated to our revenue. So you're right, Ian.
So we have some margin in terms of.
Very well, we could be higher on the revenue side because of that new construction. That's very true. Go ahead, Wayne.
Illustration that Mr. Hitchcock's presented. In that block. So again, I think he's showing
very realistic scenarios that at the end of time should work out in favor of the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, sure.
Conversations where you'd look 5 years ahead and you're like, man, if we don't change something, we're looking at $1 million down.
Right. Yeah. So as you can see, as those pilot payment escalates, you can see as we come into board policy and then go above board policy. So there's a lot of options once we get to that time of how we strategically use those funds. And I know Michelle Cradfield has talked about our comprehensive school improvement plan and how we look at that and how we conceivably strategically use those funds going forward. And that's why we back that up 1 year to take a look at that.
So confidence in the pilot projections in terms of timeline, you guys feel that they will start hitting, variables, right? Zoning, all those
Sure.
things.
Based on our last meeting with Red Velvet, their indication was it would hit this year. And basically what we saw in our pro forma from the past would just be 1 year delayed.
Project Velvet.
Sorry, did I say Red? Sorry. I'm thinking of K.
Hungry, Robert?
Project Velvet.
I concur with that. Because I was involved in that conversation. And Robert, I'm not sure.
I have the diagram in front of me, but we have not included the information about the potential 600-acre technology development on the other side of the road, which is scheduled to start in July of 23. It based on just very, very high level a look at that, I would think it would be the earliest we would see any potential pilot payment for that project would be in FY24. Before we potentially see any payments, but it's very conceivable right now on paper. We don't have all the details, but it's about 40% of the size of the Velvet project. The Velvet project has 12 buildings. Again, larger than the airport project, second largest in the nation, etc. Project on the east side of the road is going to be roughly 40% of the size of that project. So if you have 12 buildings, 40%, probably 5%. But it's all ours.
It's all ours. I think they require a substation.
And a substation
cannot be evaded at all.
Yeah, so again, it's very preliminary, but it's very possible that those same projections that you're seeing for the Golden Plains Park will be very similar in dollar value to the park on the other side of the road, because again, we're going to receive 100% of that.
The board received an email from me today. I spoke with the president of DIO, the developer, so this is more, the public. I spoke with him on the phone today and asked what was public information and what, could share. And, all that Wayne just shared is public information. But they the city of Kansas City wants mixed use in 600 acres. They want mixed use in that location, not just a data center. And so it's pretty exciting. The funding structure, according to DIO, the president of DIO, would be very, very similar to the funding structure that we have currently, agreement we currently have in Project Velvet.
That's right.
And it would be, but it would be under the port. So a different entity, if you will, exercising those abatements.
That company publicly established itself. Thank and appreciate for the ability to partner with our community and our taxing.
Which one?
Both. Because the reality is, from a resource capability, this will fundamentally change the landscape of our capability for the school district for the next 2 decades.
We're told they're both household names, but we're not told what names.
Within a 3-year scope.
I'm gonna be a little bit on the negative side. I'm still nervous. And the reason I'm nervous is the money's not realized. Anything can happen, as it often does. It could get pushed back another year. It's a pilot, which from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, if whoever sells that entity, that pilot gets renegotiated. And that pilot can get renegotiated to any amount. So as a district, if we increase annual salaries, which is something that continues on from now till the end of time, and something happens and this cash cow doesn't come in or doesn't come in like we want it, we are in a world of hurt. I love the idea of the money's coming in. I can't wait for it to get here. I can't wait for us to do wonderful things with it. But it's not here yet. And for us to make decisions as if it is, I think is awfully dangerous at this point in time.
So, my take, Scott, and you and I understand where you're coming from because we're both conservative in nature. But I weigh that in contrast to our competitive ability in the market to pay educators and support staff versus what I would call a solid projection. Because you don't develop and improve that type of infrastructure and invest in that infrastructure to constantly go through legal restructurings of how you're going to work around taxing jurisdictions, in my opinion. So I think there's a confidence here that makes me feel comfortable enough when I consider the investment opportunity back in the educational workforce and our support staff that it would be ill-advised for us not to project incremental increases as we work towards those cost recovery initiatives.
We have to be aggressive in supporting our staff with salary and resources at this point in time now more than ever.
But I know.
And I am not saying let's not support our staff.
I'm not saying.
100% agree that our staff are underpaid and they deserve more than what they have.
Right.
Without a doubt. But as a government entity, we have a limited bucket of funds to work on and to be making future decisions that are going to be with us for year in, year out, for years to come on money that's not yet realized could put us in a real dangerous spot. Worst case scenario, or not worst case scenario, a bad case scenario is if we didn't realize the $245,000 next year and we went ahead and went with the $750,000 increase. Where's that put us on our revenue percentage?
16,
And then we go the next year and we don't get the 381,000 and we put another 750, all of a sudden we're getting really, really, really low again.
But
It's not sustainable.
It's not linear. And in between I get what you're saying because we put ourselves in a bad position, 3 years ago where we were trending that way and it took us a minute to course correct. But there are mitigating tactics in terms of how we.
Mr. Haggerty has challenged us to find things that if we're not using, we need to get rid of. So you can see there's a budget restructuring for FY23 that shows $100,000. That is us removing $100,000 of supplies and textbooks expenses for that year to try to bring that to a balanced budget. Something else, if I can point out, in the middle of your projection, you have some assumptions for enrollment. And you can see our enrollment figures are very flat here. And so if we increase, let's say, just 25 kids higher for 1 year than we typically do, that's about $100,000 that we're going to see additional from the state. So this is very high level. This could easily change. And as we see some increase in enrollment and get that going in a positive direction that we haven't seen, even if we didn't get some of those beginning pilot payments, that increase in enrollment could help change that figure as well. So this is very high level. This is still very much estimates. And so I don't want, people to get so finite on some smaller numbers, but it does have some levers that you can change. And like Mr. Haggerty said, we could pull some of that pilot money out or put just half the pilot money in and see where that puts us. And so that way we can look at those scenarios with this tool.
Yeah, and Scott's brought this up in the past too. Now that we kind of have an outlook and a forecast of what it could be and kind of parameters around that, I think it does become important to kind of strategically plan as we go through our new strategic planning initiative, and what, and we know salaries is going to be a piece of that. But like, what are those other things? Because we sit in meetings where we have needs, like, Randy, I recall when you came and said, I have these needs from an infrastructure standpoint. We have these needs, we have those needs. Those all cost, and starting to really wrap our head around kind of the prioritization of those essential needs. So as we go through that, we're baking some of those costs in along with salary.
We gotta focus on salary though. We've been dragging our feet. We gotta focus on it. We don't want to lose any good teachers.
I agree, and I think there's something we need to do, and it's a fundamental shift that we need to make, is where the past several years, this board has had to have the budget to drive the strategy.
Sure.
We've got to start having the strategy drive the budget. And I think that's a critical shift that we need to make, and part of that is a realization that we do have these funds come in. We need to be conservative with it, and there's a way to do that. And so one of the things I've suggested is maybe we look at a percentage of these funds be dedicated towards increasing teacher salary and addressing some of those things to make sure that it is tied to a number that actually comes in.
And I'm 100% behind that. What I see here in front of me is let's spend it all right away. And that scares me, to be honest with you, because we are spending every last penny of it right away up for the first fiscal year or FY28. And I don't think that's wise. I just don't think that's wise to expect 100% of that to be at our fingertips, and 100% of that something we can count on.
It's just
What I do see here that I do like is it's a tool that we can sit down and, you know, it's the inputs and the outputs that matter, right? We put the right inputs in and we decide what we want to do. And, you know, this allows us to go, okay, here's our strategy, and okay, here's what that's going to cost, and make decisions, right?
It's just in Jefferson City money, and the governor talked about releasing money to the schools.
Right, and so I don't know if you're the first part of the financial review. We have about $615,000, but that was anticipated and planned for in our budget. So Missouri is one of the last states to release those dollars that we already had baked into the budget. So it really doesn't have a lot of impact, except for we got about $9,000 more than we anticipated.
Those were federal funds.
Correct, those are federal funds. Yeah, the federal government released those to the states to be allocated. And then we passed 90% of that was passed. That's correct. ESSER 3 funds.
That's just temporary relief funds. That's not.
Correct.
No operating funds year in and year out. And that's something we've done in the last couple of years, is we've kind of claimed victory on some of the budgets where we stance here. And a good portion that's only victory because of the ERSA funds, something that isn't regular, and it's not going to be here going forward. I still think we are in a time where we need to stay conservative. When this happens, I am 100% behind helping our teachers out, because they deserve it. They need it. It's the right thing to do. But we're hearing an awful lot. We're going to put this in, we're going to put this in, we're going to add this, because it's all going to get paid for the pilot. And I don't think we're at that time where we can do that. And I don't think FY23 is the right year to pull the trigger.
I'm optimistic about it. And I want to remain optimistic about it.
Mr. Kruger, I do want to point out one point of clarification. So last month, if you recall, I made a report on the insurance
benefit package for the school district. Again, our actuaries recommended roughly a 13% increase. And we were suggesting that we're in a good position, and that's not going to be necessary. If you look at the line though, however, from FY22 to FY23, you're noticing about $100,000 increase in benefit costs, insurance costs. It's illustrated on that chart. And I want to explain that real briefly, because you said, Mr. Kruger, we're not going to spend any more for insurance. Well, that $100,000 is really representing two different pots of money potentially. The first pot is if additional staff were added. If you add additional staff, there's going to be additional insurance costs, and those are included in there. So that's one reason that number went up. The second reason that number went up, we currently we offer 4 plans in our district. You pay $620 per member per month for about $7,500 annually per person. Three of our plans cost, so we pay for what we use. Roughly 3 of our plans cost about $8,000 per member per month. So really our contributions are just barely hitting the plan cost. However, we have one plan that only costs about $3,400 per member per month. So we're still contributing that $7,500 and it's really subsidizing those other plans. We have implemented and kind of baked in there a strategy to drive more people towards this consumer-driven high deductible plan by increasing a health savings account contribution. Currently, we have a health savings contribution of $30 for that plan. And we have really pretty good participation. We actually have more people participating in that plan than any other plans. However, we're going to want to update that, and we've to $60 per member per month. And per month, $60 per member per month. And those costs are actually included in that chart. So that's the other part of that increase, because we're kind of already planning that strategy. Ms. Davis is getting ready for open enrollment, getting her documents ready, and et cetera. And we're moving towards that. But I just wanted to explain that because last month we said there'll be no increases in insurance. Well, it is reflected in there. There will be some increases, but again, it's because of a couple strategies. If we can drive 10 people off of a regular plan into the more consumer-driven plan, there'll be no cost because ultimately there'll be savings. If we can drive 12 people into that plan, again, there'll be savings. If no one moves, it'll be roughly a $40-some thousand spend. But again, if we can get other people to move, those numbers come back to zero. So it's a strategy that we're wanting to implement. But again, we're showing it as a cost.
Mr. Haggerty's right. We will see less federal funding, but we also believe we'll see less expenses as well. That federal funding was subsidizing, which is the expenses for COVID and stuff like that. So we will see less revenue from federal, but we believe we'll see less expenses on the other side too.
The estimate is only a $52,000 deficit.
For the scenario that adds 750 to the certified base. Then the scenario that adds 1,000 to the base, the deficit estimated would be 152,000 plus.
And I know Robert pointed this out, but just to reiterate that the middle part, the grayscale there, the middle row, showing our student population growth. It's really quite an anomaly of what I believe and what we've seen in the drop of enrollment here. You guys see the same residential going on around town that I see, the neighborhoods that are going in. A couple of neighborhoods going in at the same time would bring us back to the days of, when you had Harvard, another neighbor, like so the days of more student growth are likely coming or returning.
10 children that attend 100% of the time would be roughly $45,000.
Hey, our growth is going to pick up. You don't know that. We have the projection tool, and it only knows the numbers. It doesn't know the construction that's going on around town. But we don't know that. Money from Golden Plains, we've just backed up the years from performance to, 1 year down the road. Will it be the 245? We don't know the number. Will it be 2 years from now? We don't know that. It's a projection tool, but it's the best that we know. It's the best information we have, at this point. So it's a risk, it's a gamble, one that some of you may not be comfortable with, and one that some of you may be comfortable with. As you look at our the ending fund balance through the years here, of course, this does factor in the projected revenues that have been mentioned, but 5.4 million, 5.1 million, 5.1 million, and then we start to go back up 5.8 million. So, if having $5 million in the bank, if we misstep here and Golden Plains goes bust and doesn't come in, we do have the opportunity to course correct as Ian mentioned earlier. It would be painful and it wouldn't be fun. We've had to course correct before. Those weren't good times. Those weren't my favorite times as superintendent. But what I'm going to end up recommending is that we take the gamble, take the risk, be aggressive, and if we miss fire, swing and a miss, then we'll have to course correct. But the new positions that are before you tonight, we do have solid revenue projected numbers to pay for these positions that you have before you this evening. Now, doesn't leave a whole lot. If that's all we were counting on, it doesn't leave a whole lot left over for teacher raises. If that was all you were counting on to provide teacher raises, but we're throwing in some additional numbers, projecting some additional numbers like Golden Plains to help us achieve the teacher raises without deficit spending. Does that make sense?
Robert?
You don't like it, but it makes sense. Your picture says 1,000 words.
The risk you're taking isn't a one-year risk. The risk you're taking is for forever and ever.
I fully understand.
And
Welcome to operating school.
Robert, my question is the 750 versus the 1,000 added to the base? Like, where does 750 take us in like becoming better, equal to other schools? I mean, what's the difference between the 750 and the 1,000?
Sure. So going by memory, we were about 48,000 around there for E10, which is the Masters Plus 10. If we were to put us mid-range, we'd have to be around 53,000. So that'd be around 5,000 to the base. Yep.
So the $1,000, to piggyback on Robert's point, we calculated that we would have to add about $35 to the base to get in the top 10 if no one else moves.
Right.
And I've talked to all the other superintendents and they're not moving.
I like Jeff's comments that those incremental increases should be associated to revenue coming in. Because the reality is these other school districts that are in the top 10 have additional revenue streams we don't have access to. So they have increased capability. But if you compare their income revenue versus the ratio of pay rate increases, there's a correlation there that makes that's the better number to track in terms of how we're moving based on the income coming into the district, in my opinion.
Something I would add with the second data center possibly coming online, I think gives a lot more confidence, to put ourselves out there a little bit. Not only have, Golden Plains Technology Park, but a second park that's all in our residential area or our district boundary that we benefit from as well. So it kind of provides a little bit of backup, although not as, secure as the Golden Plains, but to hear that and know that's coming. Well, I don't say no, that's coming. Probable that that's coming it kind of gives a little more confidence, maybe take that step
Yeah, and as
forward.
we roll into the budget workshop, right, some of that's going to become a little more clear.
which is in May.
Which is in May.
And I believe the illustration that Robert presented to you this evening shows not only the additional staff and the possibility of
750 or 1,000 to the base this year, but it also shows it in future years. So one strategy could very easily be, it's certainly a year by year scenario. So just because they're plugged in there doesn't mean that they are going to occur. And you have the ability to not only do those numbers, you could do more or less any given year as we move forward. And that significantly changes that bottom line for reoccurring costs. For example, if you just plug it in next year and don't illustrate it for the next several years, it really put several numbers in the blue.
Numbers are going to be different than they are tonight.
Sure. And if anybody has any scenarios you'd like me to run for a future meeting, I'd be happy to do it. Have it ready, then I can present that at any time.
I agree with that, but we're going to be asked tonight to make decisions on future spending according to these projections. So it's not just something it's not a trivial discussion at this point in time. One of the questions I do have, just as a reminder, at what level, what reserves does the state say, hey, you're too low and
5%,
5%?
right?
The state comes in at 5%.
5%.
Any other questions on the general financial review?
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Wayne. Update on enrollment 10.2.
Yeah, you have the update there in your packet. We've gained a few students. And also those numbers, as you can see, reflect the students that graduated early. So I have on enrollment, unless you have questions for me.
No questions? Okay, 10.3, approved board policy HH, collective bargaining for the first reading.
Karen and I apologize. The policy that you had in the last meeting, was the wrong sample policy, which is why, Scott, you picked some stuff out in there that was off. This is the correct policy. And we've even had our lawyer go back through it again to be sure that everything in here is reflective of the conversation that you had with your lawyer. So this is what is being recommended. And just to be sure that we're crossing all of our T's, dotting all of our I's, doing everything correctly, we recommend, and your recommendation there is that you rescind last month's vote. So rescind last month's vote, which you approved there, and to approve this policy as a first reading. And I apologize for the confusion.
You're forgiven. Questions or comments?
On policy HH. Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve for first reading policy HH, the collective bargaining policy.
Second.
We've got a motion in a second to approve policy HH in a first reading, the collective bargaining policy. Any further discussion? Please vote.
Randy's got a blank ESC screen.
You break it, Scott?
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. For those members in the audience, we've got 13 action items here in new business, so bear with us. 11.1, weighted course designation for cadet teaching.
Dr. Krebs.
Yeah, as I shared in the memo regarding this item, several years ago, we moved to weighted grades at the high school, and we have specific criteria that we consider when we designate those courses. Last year, our cadet teaching program became a dual credit class, and that is one of the qualifications for weighted grades. So we considered all of the other criteria and have determined that cadet teaching should be a weighted course. And so we're asking the board to approve that designation. That will begin next school year. It is not retroactive.
Answer questions on the request to make cadet teaching a weighted course. Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the recommendation to make cadet teaching a weighted course designation.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the request to make cadet teaching a weighted course. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 11.2, recommendation for summer student internship course.
The last week I was at a real world learning session on Thursday when we were putting the board packet together. And luckily this was the first agenda item that they addressed, but the Kauffman Foundation has been working on a summer course for students. It would be 1,250 hours in an internship that would be paid. I'm sorry, it's 250 hours and they're paid $1,250. But the other piece of that is they would like it to count for one general elective credit toward their completion of their graduation requirements. It meets the criteria for that designation. And so we're asking the board to approve that. Just so you know, the students will have to apply and be accepted through Kauffman. So it is not something that they can just say, I'm signing up for this class through us. But if they apply and are accepted and are hired by a company for an internship, then we will honor and give them a one general elective credit.
Which also gives them the experience of applying and interviewing for a job.
And it counts as a market value asset. So that internship is important.
Any other comments or questions for Dr. Craddock-Phil? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion and a second for the recommendation for summer student internship course.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation for summer student internship course. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 11.3 Administrator Contracts Report 2022-2023.
Yeah, you have recommendation for the contracts for our administrators. Can answer any questions you may have.
There really were no discussions when we reviewed the contracts in executive session. I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the Administrator Contracts Report as presented in our packet.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the administrator contracts as presented in our packet. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. Karen, I'm going to change this as well in 11.4 because we changed it in executive session. This will be returning teacher contracts 2022-2023.
Yeah, you have the contracts there that we recommend you approve for our teaching staff.
Once again, we went through the list of returning teachers for contract extension for the 2022-2023 school year. Any discussion in open session? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the returning teacher contracts for the 2022-2023 school year.
So moved. Second.
We've got a motion and a second to approve the returning teacher contracts for the 2022-2023 school year. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 11.5, the personnel report. We had in our packet the personnel report for the new that we reviewed in executive session. Any comments or questions on the personnel report that we did not cover during that time? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the personnel report as presented in our packet.
So moved. Second.
Counting on you, Ian. Got a motion and a second to approve the personnel report as presented in our packet. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 11.6, extracurricular stipends.
Yeah, this would be year 2 of in terms of additional coaching positions. Our goal is to get all of our varsity programs at what's considered the average for each program, what we call the 92 corridor. So you've got in your packet there a comparison that Mr. Schaefer does every year, looks at Kearney, looks at Platte County, looks at Excelsior Springs, looks at every sport and activity, and looks at the number of district paid coaches or sponsors and how we compare in that regard. And so we are asking for 3 additional positions this evening, and we expect to bring you a 4th. We're not sure what the 4th one, where the 4th one's going to fall yet, which is why you don't have that before you tonight. I told Mr. Schaefer that we could bring the 3 that we were confident of, and then we can come back with the 4th later.
The question was asked in executive session about year 3, and Mr. Hedgeworth came up before the meeting and told me that he does have the information from Mr. Schaefer on year 3, if he'd like to share that.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Schaefer showed me that would be girls softball, cross country, girls dance, and boys swim would be year 3 of that plan.
That answered the questions that were
Brought, I think, okay.
That's what we're voting on.
We're voting on the ones that were in the packet to add. Those were for next year. There was a question about the year 3 of the plan.
2 football and track and field. And you can tell from that comparison that those 2 are far behind on.
You're not increasing the FTE for football, you're absorbing the allocation paid by the district.
For football.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I struggle when we compare
Ourselves to other schools and we're doing so well with what we got, but yet we seem to want more. Again, it's the whole financial thing. You said it before, we can do anything. We just can't do all things. We can't do new administrators. We can't do new coaches. We can't do better teachers. We can't do it all.
But how long is the Boosters Club going to carry them? That's the question. We're going to have to pay those coaches.
Well, I just think that we have the resources to pay at least what average suburban kids are getting from their school district programs. We have the resources to do that. So I don't want our kids, which is why I've always hated them, don't have tennis. Tennis just hasn't been a high priority for our community, for our school district. So I want to provide our students reasonably what we can, what they could get from any other suburban district. So if you look at the average number of district paid coaches in all of these other school districts around us, I think we should be able to provide that similar resource.
But if I use that same argument, give the same number of coaches that our schools around us do. We pay our teachers the same as the surrounding school does. We pay our administrators the same as we do the surrounding school does. We have the same number of administrators that the schools around us do. We don't have the resources. We don't. And when we ask where are we going to put our money, if I can choose one of those, I'm choosing teachers. It's not going to be coaches. It's not going to be administrators. It's going to be teachers. We don't have resources to do everything. We have resources to do something.
Okay, well, we recommend that you approve these 3 coaching positions, knowing that you're going to have a 4th one recommended. The total cost is estimated at $11,000.
And I will say that the one thing is that these coaching positions are also teachers included. So this is extracurricular stipends. So this is on top of the teaching salaries, just another perspective of it.
Football, 3.
Thank you.
3,800 for track and field.
Hey, Robert, are there any rules on how much money we have to spend towards men's and women's sports? like college?
I don't know if there's rules per se as far as dollar for dollar, but there is a general rule as far as opportunities. And so that's kind of how it's worded. Denise, do you have any Title IX pieces that you'd like to
I would
add?
have to really research that.
Yeah,
Right.
I just want to make sure we're staying.
So they talk
legal.
about equal opportunity, you know, they don't have like an exact dollar for dollar match. They know different, you know, sports, whether it's gymnastics, boys basketball, volleyball, have different costs. So the wordage is always opportunity is what I've always seen used.
For our stipends for men's or women's sports, the stipend is the same, whether it's for a coach of a male team or female team. So that is equitable.
I just, that's why I wanted to ask about next year, the next time. I just want to make sure we're looking at all sports and in all areas. I know dances only has one coach, and it's like the only dance and swim are the only ones that only have one coach. So just looking at making sure we're keeping everybody fair too.
That's a great point. And working with Mr. Schaefer, that's something that we've been looking at, and some of the items that we're comparing, not only across the different school districts, but, you know, how do the teams travel? Do they travel all together? Are the, you know, competition split between JV and varsity and C team? What does that look like for supervision? So there's a lot of factors that go into that. So we're trying to evaluate all of those parameters to make sure that we are trying to be as fair and equitable across all sports and all groups, so that, you know, we're able to supervise, provide the right amount of coaching, the right one-on-one. So we are trying to evaluate the entire process.
Keep that in mind as you bring the fourth recommendation.
State that it should be equitable, but not identical, but I will have to look in to see if it says something further beyond that.
I'm sorry.
Well, can you remind me where the allocations, as we started, historically went since we've been in this part of year two? Do we have that
Well,
segmented out?
I'd have to look it up myself. If you have it,
One was
One-
basketball, women's
one
basketball,
football,
one football, and was there a
so
fourth?
that was it.
Okay, it was those three then.
Or wrestling. Wrestling.
Wrestling
Yeah,
side,
women's
there
wrestling,
was
which
one
was
for women's
promised
wrestling,
before COVID. So actually, technically, there was 4.
right, one for women's wrestling.
Yeah, so 4 last year, we're asking for 4 this year, but just 3 tonight.
Any other questions or comments on extracurricular stipends? I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the extracurricular stipend as submitted in our packet.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the extracurricular stipend as presented in our packet. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 6-1. 11.7, restoration of full-time assistant principals at the middle school and elementary schools.
Yeah, this is just trying to get us back to where we were a couple of years ago when we had a full-time assistant principal at each building. This is, make no mistake, this is a big chunk of change. This is about $100,000 per position. When you throw in all of the benefits, these people aren't necessarily making $100,000, but we pay retirements and benefits and all of that.
Indirect, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but our staff's been very, very clear, kind of like the recess aides. When we cut those recess aides to save money, you know, we really heard about how much that hurt in terms of planning time and for teachers to be able to get, you know, that's a resource they really, really valued. So we added half of them back in. They were grateful, but really they really needed all of it back. And so we got it all back. Well, same kind of deal here after feedback. And, you know, I had one teacher tell me that when we cut those, initially, this particular teacher thought, well, good, we're got too many administrators running around here anyway. And she, tells me that and laughs because now she's like, oh my gosh, please give them back. They are so supportive in what we're trying to get done, in the classroom. So just one conversation with one teacher. But anyway, we recommend we add these back in for next school year. That's 2 FTE. Meaning that it's one additional elementary assistant principal, and then you're also making the middle school assistant principal a full-time position as well.
Comments or questions?
So how did we collect and come to this feedback?
We get a lot of feedback from staff through our rounding activity. Quick reminder on that, the central office administration takes the entire staff, everybody that gets a check from us, and we divide them up among us. And we have one-on-one interviews with all of them, or we invite all of them to participate in one-on-one interviews. Not everybody takes advantage of the opportunity. We have 15 to 30-minute interviews with them. We ask them all the same questions. We collect data from those conversations. We compile that data, and we look for themes in our data.
Have we generated the stoplight report off this data?
I don't recall having this conversation last month. So it feels abrupt to me.
No, we have in the stoplight report, I believe from the last one that we did, some feedback on additional.
That's highlighted pretty. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't recall
And
it.
I don't recall focusing on that conversation. So if we knew this was a strat, so when did the administration say, okay, this is a need, we need to pull a trigger? Because I don't feel like it
Last year, year after we pulled the plug on it, it's come up the last 2 years as we've.
We had the business. The building administrators come in, they, all of those that were affected, each one of those brought that up. And I've been going to the listening tours that the schools have been having. And I have to agree with Todd, that came up quite a bit with teachers, not just principals saying we needed it, but actual teachers saying we needed it too.
Yeah, I asked for it to be added back in for this school year. So last year was asked to be added back in for this year. I said no, and we took care of some other, priorities, and it's on the list again. Remember earlier I said like over $900,000 in new positions were requested. Well, we certainly don't greenlight all of them. It wasn't greenlighted last year. Continuing to get the same feedback that this is a resource that is desperately desired. And so that's why I greenlight it this year with the additional feedback.
Kind of with being, as the half one was coming to move full time, didn't realize we were asking for a second one until I read the packet. And I am in support of the one going full time, but the other one, I'm just going to be a broken record.
Okay. Well, you had one assistant principal that went to Eagle Heights, so you lost 1.5 FTEs.
Yeah, we're not.
At the high school.
You're only adding half.
That FTE is the same.
No, you're adding a whole, but the 2 part-times are consolidating into 1 FTE.
Yes.
But you lost one of the assistant principals as the new principal of Eagle Heights that we approved last month. So we still have a full FTE that we currently have this year at the high school to be hired.
Well, then we're not adding staff.
These are the middle school and elementary principals that we omitted or cut 2 or 3 years ago during the budget restructure. Mr. Kuska has been at Horizon in middle school, and Ashley Dahl has been at Eagle and Maple. They've been splitting their time between the 2 schools each. What they want to do is add 2 FTEs to give each elementary and the middle school a full-time assistant principal, which we had as of 3 years ago that were cut during the budget restructure. Those are what these are the elementary and the middle schools. These don't have anything to do with the high school restructuring.
So is the catalyst of bringing this forward now have to do with
Contract cycle and process of how we hire people.
Oh,
Because
great.
if not, why didn't we go dive into this last month? And if we did, I just don't recall it. It's not,
Well, we have to go through a process to determine, what to bring forward, what to push forward. We tier our requests. And we don't just, we try not to just charge forward with everything all at once, although it may feel like that's what we're doing this evening. So we have to go through a process where we study our budget cycle. So Robert showed you a document today. That'll change quite a bit before we in June. Well, when we sit down with our administrators in January, what we're going to ask for in staffing, we have to go through the procedure. Bringing it to you in March gives us time to be competitive in recruiting all of these positions, but especially the administrative positions.
Yeah, I think what makes it hard, and maybe harder for Scott.
hard for me is I don't have the full financial, stamp that we would get out of May. And to me, the need's justifiable. I know of other districts who don't have the luxury, and me being married to an educator, I know the benefit they get with an additional body to go work with at administrator level. So there's a huge benefit to that. I don't have the full awareness. We have a snapshot, right? That's going to eventually evolve out over the workshop. But for me, as long as it went through a process, Todd, where it was enriched and collaborated on from people at the building level, the principal level, the administration level, and this was collectively decided as a priority to move forward, I'm okay. I just don't feel like I have great awareness on how that occurred.
So if I can interject, it does go through an extensive process. So we start talking with our principals in January to let them know we need to start looking at what are our staff needs, what are our support needs for our students early, so we can get that on paper. So we share a Google spreadsheet. We ask the principals to meet with their building leadership to talk about what are the greatest needs for that building to support not only students, but to also support our staff. Once we get that information, I met individually with all the building principals to talk about what they provided on that spreadsheet. There's a lot of information that's included, not only like what is the position, what is the FTE. Once we find out what that is, we reach out and work with Robert and Wayne on what does that cost look like, what is the rationale for that. Is this a first time ask? Has this come up again and again? So we kind of dive into that with the principals. Once I have that information, I share that with cabinet. I go back to the principals again, and we kind of went through it a second time. We worked together at the elementary level with the principals collaboratively, trying to look at how do these particular positions impact your building individually, the elementary structure as a whole, and how does that impact the entire district. We did the same thing at the secondary level, met with Mr. Winterborough and Dr. Platt, went through that entire process. We bring it back to cabinet, talk through it again, and really try and decide what is a critical need and how is that going to impact not only our students, but our staff. With every conversation that we've had in rounding, and then also with our principals, it's been indicated as a critical need in the rationale that was provided for you in your board packet. They very clearly highlighted that the principals are needing this for their staff, for staff retention. Behaviors have escalated, instructional guidance has decreased. So if we're not able to support our teachers, we're not able to support our students. And so this, correct.
So it sounds like you're summarizing that. Is there a way you guys can share that periodically throughout the year? Because it ebb and flows, right? Some things become more of a hot topic and they become a priority at that time. And for me, I just want to have awareness as we roll in to the, because right now you're forecasting and getting ready for your June closeout and your financial. I get all that. I'm doing the exact same thing with my work. But I don't feel like I touch it and see it as much and understand it. So that's my only request.
I think that we can bring it to you sooner and give you a forecast of what we're looking at without actually
'Cause we did
bringing the
updates.
recommendation.
We did programmatic updates where people have come in and kind of requested and said, hey, here's our needs. But outside of that, I haven't seen the maturity and the conversation that has developed. And for me, a big piece for me is I love that the administrators are collaborating and taking, my hope is they take that back work at a building level and enrich those topics. So they bring it back and everyone collectively, if I went and asked Justin, hey, you know, have you heard about this? Have you had conversations around this? He would say yes. And I want to make sure that it has an opportunity to be enriched that way.
Or I certainly feel like we're doing that. And what we want to bring to you is that final recommendation without you having to get into the weeds of all of it. But we certainly can be more transparent.
Well,
and
I
bring
think,
that
you know,
process.
your overview of that process was helpful. You know, rounding is a touch point for you guys to touch your employees and gain that insight. So those are great things. I just didn't understand that process until just right now.
Absolutely.
Which is tough when you have a request in front of you.
Mhm.
We typically have over $1 million worth of ask in any given year of added salary. And that beginning preliminary, just give us what's on your mind. Rank it critical, high, medium, low. And then, you know, we meet with different groups like Kim described, and try to narrow it down to just those essential positions, you know, going in next year based on feedback from everybody. And so what we have presented is what ended up filtering down to the final group.
Yeah.
Request, you know, and we've had bits and pieces of that, no doubt. So.
Any other comments or questions on 11.7, the restoration of the full-time assistant principals at the middle school and elementary schools? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the restoration of full-time assistant principals at the middle school and elementary schools. Second. Got a motion and a second to approve the restoration of the full-time assistant principals at the middle school and elementary schools. Any further discussion? Please vote.
Karen, you had me as the second, not Lynn. Yep.
Motion passes 6-1. 11.8 custodian 0.5 FTE.
Yeah, this one here, we're adding 24,000 square feet to this campus. I tried to talk Robert into go ahead and cleaning that on top of his current duties, and he wasn't buying it. So we need some additional help with that additional square footage. So we recommend you approve this 0.5 FTE to help us with that additional square footage.
I will say for anybody that's been up in Ambrose weight room or in Mr. Middleton's wrestling room, they are kept very neat, very tidy. But, you know, as far as showers and restrooms and all of that kind of stuff, but they are very prideful people and treat it like it's theirs. So they will be a huge help. Or it could be a full-time FTE.
Large facility with a lot of restrooms. So
It's like 2.5 of these buildings of this Smithville office building.
Any
Robert, $20.
$20 a day?
Yeah.
A week?
Have to interview.
What is worth your current full-time average 28,000
Square feet per assignment. So.
We're only asking for a half.
sounds like a 550 opportunity for you.
For me?
Yeah.
In a couple of years? Okay. Some days that sounds pretty nice.
Any further comments or questions on the 0.5 FTE custodian request? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the request for the 0.5 FTE custodian.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the request for the 0.5 FTE custodian. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 11.9, restoration of 1.0 technology full-time employee, the network administrator position.
Yeah, if you recall, when Mr. Wallace did the program evaluation on technology, we talked about this at that evening. And we have gone backwards in our FTE in the technology department, much like we've gone backwards in the building administration department. When we stole Robert from technology and into operations, it took a lot of his attention away from technology. And then Randy, took on a lot of leadership duties. Plus, he's also serving as network administrator. Gavin's stepping up in there. So anyway, on top of that, we've added a lot of technology in the district during that time. So this is one of those infrastructure type of personnel items. We talked about HVAC in the schools, and that that's not sexy, although some teachers are telling us that it actually really is. Well, this is something you don't think about much. You don't unless your technology's not working, unless the air conditioning's not working. So we need to get back up to snuff here with our resources in technology to better support our staff and to keep our network operating smoothly. So we recommend you approve this network position that's presented to you here.
And again, this was one of the positions that was not filled when we went through our budget restructuring here 2 or 3 years ago. Any other comments or questions on the request for an FTE network administrator?
And these are already baked in, Robert, to your projections.
Okay. If there's no more questions, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the request for the restoration of the 1.0 FTE network administrator. Got a motion and a second to approve the request for the 1 FTE network administrator position. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 6-1. 11.10, special education teacher.
Sam Brother, do you want to speak to this one?
Sure. Without going into too many details regarding students and their needs. We have at high school next year, we will have 11 students in our essential skills classroom, which is our highest needs special education room. And for one teacher to take on 11 students is very difficult. If you have been into any of the buildings and toured some of those classrooms, you can see that the needs of those students, continue to increase. So just with some students moving to the middle school and then already having students that have either moved into the district or that have qualified for certain services, there's obviously a need for an additional 0.5. Also for the middle school, we have students that are transitioning from 6th grade to 7th grade. And so those students moving into the middle school, there will be additional needs that need to be met at the middle school level. So we really need to have an additional teacher to split between the middle school and high school to help service those kiddos to get in their IEP minutes and just provide the services that are needed. Any questions that you guys might have, I would be happy to answer.
Comments on the request for the special education teacher.
Well, I mean, we need to say compliance, right? I mean, it's not like
Absolutely.
we can say no.
Yeah, I mean, it's a must.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the request for the additional special education teacher as requested.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second to approve the request for the special education teacher. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 11.11, high school science teacher.
Dr. Crowdfield, you want to cover this one?
Sure. This has actually been on the list for several years. Kim mentioned that we look at history on the requests, but there's always been something that's had more priority. So it's not something that we've been able to fill. But in order to meet the requests that our students have for science classes, we have 2 teachers who are teaching multiple online classes, which the stipend for that, along with benefits, is close to $18,000 a year. And so we will be able to recoup a third of the salary of this teacher just by eliminating those online courses. We just don't have the staff to meet the requests that our students have in this very important content area. And it's time for us to catch up and provide an additional teacher. This will allow us to offer more of our PLTW Biomed. It will also allow us to extend to the 3rd year of the PLTW engineering program, which we haven't had for a couple of years. But Mr. Matthews has done an amazing job building that program. It's actually more robust now than it's ever been. And we definitely need to provide that 3rd year opportunity for our students to have an additional engineering class.
One of the things we also did a couple of years ago when we remodeled was to expand the science labs as well and increase the opportunities in the labs when we had made the hallway and put the additional entrance into the cafeteria. So I know those science rooms have been expanded and given more opportunities. Any other comments or questions on the high school science teacher request? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the request for the additional high school science teacher in our packet.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the request for a high school science teacher, an additional high school science teacher. Any further discussion? Please vote.
Thank you.
Motion passes. 11.12, RFP quote summary for wireless equipment.
Mr. Wallace.
Usually they all say.
I figured out why. Okay. Yes. So yeah, this proposal is for the wireless equipment. This is mostly, this wireless would be for the new building, the athletic building that we just built. And then there's also built into that, there's some spots in the building in the high school that are not getting good coverage. So this would cover that as well. And this is part of this is to approve the vendor. After this is approved, since we had multiple vendors that did have submissions, then I would reevaluate to make sure that you know, maybe we could reduce the amount of wireless. I do have to, when I submit, since this is all covered by E-rate, which gives us a discount, part of that proposal is I basically have to give the whole wish list of everything that I think we could need, and I can go less than that, but I can't go more. So what I'm proposing to you would be the best case, or I guess depending on budget wise, worst case scenario. But then again, this is covered by E-rate, and so this could go down. Well, from what I've proposed.
Favorable pricing, is that why? So I don't know if it's higher right now. But in terms of the infrastructure investment, for me, it makes more sense than one that's in the May and bank on final budgets projections for FY23. And the other question I have is infrastructure related to the new building, can I not after the project cost?
Well, the way, I mean, part of this, most of this, we have a certain amount that we're proposing, which is covered by E-rate, which I think is what currently is at 40%?
40%.
Yeah, 40%.
We get money back. E-rate program is getting money back from the federal government for technology purchases that relate to students using the internet. So if we didn't purchase this equipment, the facility would not have internet access. We would not be able to, basically communicate, intercom, anything. So we have to outfit this building with equipment. It will be paid from phase 7 funding, but if we do it now, we can get a 40% reimbursement from the federal government because it is network equipment, which involves anything to do with networking and kids, getting basically out to the internet from the access point all the way through. Sure.
Right. So
the deadline to submit for E-rate is April. So that's why we're bringing it to the March meeting. If we wait till after April, we won't get the 40% discount that E-rate offers if we purchase it through that program.
Yes, there was 2 proposals. Yeah, I believe this was the 39.
We'll get 40% of that back. Correct.
Next year, right? It comes in next year when we get it. Yeah.
All that we funded through the phase 7 construction. We're just trying to make that cost less by using E-rate funding. Right.
So the portion we have would come from that.
Right.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the RFP quote summary for wireless equipment for the new facility.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the quote summary for wireless equipment as presented in your packet. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. Final one, 11.13 RFP quote summary for network switching. Mr. Wallace.
Okay, sorry, multitasking. So this is part of the same thing. So to make the wireless happen so that we can have point of sales at the new building, so that we can have wireless for instruction. The infrastructure you were talking about, that's this part of that, which would be the infrastructure for that. Also, the paging system that is going to allow paging to happen out at the new facility is going to be branched off of the high school. So this would be an upgrade for that as well. They're kind of tied together between the high school and this new building, and the fiber that goes between those, which is also qualifies for E-rate. And then the switching to make all of that happen, the instruction, the point of sales, the paging, and just regular, wireless out there for devices. This would provide that backbone infrastructure for that.
And to service other parts of the campus to take so much off that one.
Well, the switching that's proposed in this is mostly just to make the new building happen, and then as well as the new system for the paging at the high school. We do have redundancy built into our network, so this would partially be that, but just for that section. Yep.
You funded out of the project.
Yeah, so the same, this is also E-rate. So this is also the 40%. So then the other part, that's not covered. The other 60% then would come out of the building funds.
Additional comments, questions on the quote for the network switch? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the RFP quote summary for network switching as presented in our packet.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second to approve the RFP quote summary for network switching as presented in our packet. Any further discussion? Please vote.
Mr. President, I would request like a 5-minute.
Are we done?
We're almost done.
If we've got miscellaneous is all we've got.
We don't need this. Okay, I'll hold it.
Hold it.
Do you
I'll be
remember,
more
do you
messy
remember the
than
days?
Yeah.
You said cross your legs.
You got this, but no lameness.
Okay, here we go. Miscellaneous 12.1.
I will be brief, Ian. Just a reminder, next week or next month, our board meeting is a week early as well, April 13th. That's due to the election, so the board can certify the election in enough time. Item number 2, just a heads up, May 9th, you have a program evaluation night as well as the budget workshop. That's May 9th, 6 p.m. if you want to check your calendars. I'm going to come back to number 3, those that attended the MSBA Legislative Forum on Monday. Item number 4, board walkthrough, March 29th. We start at 8 a.m. Smithville High School. Meet you in the lobby at 8 a.m. if you're attending on that day. As we get closer to that day, I'll ask who all will be attending so I know who to look for before we get started. And then item number 5, Karen and I wanted you to be aware that you are very close to, as a board, eligible for the MSBA Governance Award. And you have in your packet the criteria for that. Ian, I think you have some retraining or something left to do for this year. I'm not sure what that.
I've seen that info, yeah.
You got something left to do on that. Okay, so you guys have all that information. So anyway, you're close to that. I'll just leave that with you. If you would like to, to go for that, you're very, very close. Now they do that in June at the conference that Len and Susan and I went to last year. That was in Springfield. And no, that's the, I forgot the title of it, the MSBA conference in June. Something like that. And there may be a different title each year, but just want to make you aware of that.
Last year.
It's in Springfield. And then the last one, then the MSBA Legislative Forum, March 7th. Lynn, you and Jeff went, is that right?
I went. Did you go, Jeff? Oh, I went.
You went?
Yeah.
Tell us what you learned.
150 board members. The over 150 board members there was really good.
Okay.
The DESI head, she's not called the secretary.
Commissioner?
Commissioner of DESI spoke very positive about what's coming up, kind of congratulating everybody on getting through COVID. And we had 4 senators, female senators, come and talk to us, and they wrote a book. I just presented the book to Maple today, but they wrote a book on, it's good. I think the name of the book is You Can Too. There were 11 women senators got together for a sleepover to get to know each other, Democrat and Republican. And decided that getting to know each other, they could work better together to get stuff done. So they wrote a book. It's at Maple. I just presented it today and they took pictures, but it's an incredible book. And these women there's one that I want to run that should run for governor because she'd make a good governor. But these were incredible women, just incredible. And we went over to the State House, at the Rotunda, and the governor spoke. Gave us all kinds of positive feelings about the money that's coming in and how they felt about it. There was a student up at the 3rd floor. There was a student exhibit up there. There were 5 teaching academy exhibits up there of schools that are doing teaching academies. Some of them, their kids are teaching 3 days a week, some 2 days a week. Very encouraging. And it was good. It was really good.
Good. Thank you, Lynn. All I have.
Any additional comments or questions? Or we adjourn? No, let's roll.
No.
Turn on some water.
Hearing none, I'll accept the motion, second to adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adjourn. Please vote.
She's my advanced certification.
Okay, Scott, sorry, she's gonna do a roll call vote for Liz.
Aye.
Yes, Steve. Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Sharon, didn't Ian have something he needed to do? Because this isn't showing he has anything he needs to do. I thought we-
Yes, man. My butt hurts.
Some type of recertification